Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to announce that today we're going to have Ms. Zang from ITM Trading joining in. Now, I've been following Ms. Zang for a very long time and have learned a lot from her. So today we're going to be talking about current events in our financial systems and the economy and what we can do to better prepare for our economic future. As you all know, I believe that we should all first and foremost have a full pantry and have all those things that we need that are necessary in order for us to maintain the standard of living that we are used to. However, once we reach that next paradigm, we want to make sure that we don't just start at the first rung of the ladder, meaning only being able to afford to get those things that we need in order to survive. We want to thrive. And how do we do that? Not only by having things and getting through the crisis, but also by having a good financial plan in order that we may be able to preserve any excess wealth that we may have and bring it into the future with us. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Lynette Zang from ITM Trading to the Alaska Prepper community.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me, Rudy.
Well, Ms. Zang, as you can see, I wore a collared shirt for you today because that's how special you are to me when it comes to finances and stuff. So first of all, I wanted to thank you very much for joining in with us today. It is a true honor to have you. I remember I did an interview with you about 2 years ago and it was terrible because it was only audio, but hopefully this one will come out a lot better. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining in. First of all, it's going to be a big treat. So let's go ahead and get started. Ladies and gentlemen, I was so excited to interview Ms. Zang for this video that in true AP fashion, I forgot to push the record button for the first couple of minutes of the interview. So the first question that I asked Ms. Zang was, what did she think about all of this talk that's going on about the Great Reset and about how we will own nothing and be happy?
But yes, we should all be. We will own nothing and be happy. That's what the World Economic Forum is all about. We will own nothing and be happy. Oh, I don't think so. Because at the end of the day, every single asset is owned by someone. And whoever owns that asset controls the future of that asset. So, you know, if you're renting, guess who gets to dictate how much that rent is? Do they give a crap about their premium? Of course they
not. Absolutely not. Right. So I want to talk about what happened in Cyprus back in 2013, I think it was, 2013, 2014, where they had a bail-in. And is that something, I've talked about this several times, and in my opinion, it's already written into law here in the United States that banks can bail in their depositors. Is that something that you foresee maybe happening here in the future, Ms. Lang?
Absolutely. And it's not your opinion. It is written into the Dodd-Frank Act. And while they've dismantled most of it, that they have not dismantled. And so the answer is yes. And Cyprus was a big test to see how people would respond, how the world would respond. And after the Cyprus test where they bailed in, the first go-around, when they very first did it, they did not honor deposit insurance. And, you know, deposit insurance was a scheme they cooked up in the 30s to get people to feel comfortable going back into the banking system. And they call it a scheme. Those are not my words. They admit this is a scheme. And so when they tested it, and first they just took everything, the world outcried and said, oh, but what about deposit insurance? What about deposit insurance? And so they backed up and they honored the deposit insurance, even though those people had no access to their funds that they held inside of the system. But also, you know, the other thing that I want to point out to you about that period of time is that, and we could share that, Edgar, would you make sure that you send Rudy the graph on the savers in Cyprus? Because Cyprus had just a little bit before that joined the European Union, and you can see the French and German banks and the bigger banks that piled into the Cypriot debt because of the interest rates, but you can also see fair warning about the bail-in and how they got themselves out of that circumstance, but left savers in those circumstances, because
Right.
savers are what are called sticky. And, you know, since you brought that up, let's take that up today. One more point that I want to bring up, and then let's take what you're talking about to today and what's happening in the financial system today. But the Bank for International Settlements came out. Anybody can Google this, or we can give you that link as well. Make it easy. I like to make it easy for people. Where they showed this graphic on what it would look like bailing in with and without deposit insurance. Because who's going to make that whole? They're just going to go ahead and print a whole bunch more money to do it. So absolutely. And if you look at what's happening today between banks and fintech companies, and I did a piece on this a while ago where I said they're going to have to merge together, because what banks have is that sticky relationship with the customers. You know, who changes their bank account? That's not something you do very often. Once you're with a bank, you have a tendency to stay. But the fintech companies and the technology companies, they have all of this data on your habits, what you do.
Yep.
And so I think JP Morgan this year alone, and we're only in July now, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure they've bought 5 fintech companies so far this year.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and more earlier than that. So we're seeing those two entities come together. And of course, the Fed Now accounts, which were announced last year, and they're supposedly not going to be ready till 2023. Why did they make a big deal about announcing the Fed Now accounts and making sure that everybody has one set up already, whether they realize it or not, even through the post office in more rural areas? So, you know, you have to understand it's a merger of big technology with your money and programmable money. Okay, they can dictate that they don't like your politics. Okay.
Right. They can demonetize your life, is what I like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ms. Zhang, for some viewers that may not know what a Fed Now account is that the account that the Federal Reserve is making for every American citizen that will connect them with a CBDC
Exactly.
electric wallet? Right? Okay, that's what that is. That's what I thought.
It's not just in the banks; it's in the credit unions, because people they all
Right.
well is no, it's in the credit unions. It's in the postal services for those really rural areas. They want to make sure everybody gets a Fed Now account, and they have direct control over the individual. Even they're not bypassing the banks because they're doing it through the banks and the credit unions and the postal services, because they don't want to bypass them. But it does change how they execute policy, for sure.
So I always tell people that they should get out of the system as much as they can. Not only the banking system, but, you know, to create their own infrastructures per se. So if you depend on the electrical infrastructure, make sure that you have a backup for that infrastructure should it go down. And a lot of people go back to what you were talking about, to the insurance, to the FDIC, and they say, well, if something happens that's of a systemic nature, then we'll just go, FDIC is going to bail us out. But I go back and I tell them, listen, the FDIC, the last time I checked the numbers, and I haven't checked them in a little bit, but they had less than 1% of all that they would need if we had a systemic breakdown in the banking / financial system just to cover those people or those accounts that had less than $250,000 in them. Am I on point with that, or am I off on that?
No, you are completely on point with that. And not only that, but let's look at what we're talking about here, which is the nominal number Forget the purchasing power number, which is frankly far, far, far more important to you and me and to everybody that's listening and watching this. It doesn't matter. 1,000,000,000,000 times zero is still zero. Look at Venezuela. Look at Zimbabwe. Look at a lot of other countries. And by the way, the bail-in didn't just happen in Cyprus. It's also happened in Greece. It happened in Poland. It's happened in many places in the world. But who gets bailed in? The banks, the corporations. That's who's been bailed in through this fiat money system the entire time. That's what's enabled that wealth and income inequality. And because the general public would not have tolerated what happened in 2008, where it was so obvious that the banks got bailed out. So now they're bailing out everybody, but they're really setting us up for a UBI, universal basic income, because this is a consumer-driven world. And the consumer has to consume. Yep. But if you look at the purchasing power, anybody can do this. Edgar, we'll send this link to. The purchasing power of the consumer dollar, according to the Federal Reserve, the loss of purchasing power is really, really speeding up. Of course it is. You can't create money out of thin air. And even though it's inflating those targets, the stock market, the bond market, the real estate market, it still has an impact on your purchasing power. And so it's garbage to say that, there's no inflation and that it's under control. The thing that people don't really understand, it's the relationship between deflation and inflation. And the reality is they really are the same side of the coin, or the different sides of the same coin. Because the Federal Reserve, Thomas Jefferson said, and I hope I don't butcher this, but Thomas Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their money, first by inflation, then by deflation, the corporations and banks that grow up around them will deprive the people of all of their property until their children wake up homeless in the continent that they conquered.
Yep.
And is that not where we are right now? You will own nothing. Where we are. And you will be happy, and I have chills because we were warned. We were warned. Yep. And we did not take heed. And we need to take heed now, because the system that they have planned for us, they will control every single aspect of your life. They will tax you like crazy. And they will attack your principal. And if you are not as independent as possible, this makes having physical gold, physical silver in any form, I don't care what form it is. I mean, obviously I have lots of coins too, but in any form, gold and silver are monetary at their base. So if you have Aunt Bessie's sterling flatware, guess what? That's 92.5% pure. Any talent that you have, anything physical that you have, that is all barterable. We have to be as independent and self-sufficient inside of a broader community, because we don't need the majority to know what's going on. We just need a very vocal minority, and we need to spread.
Right. That's why I've always said that CBDC is going to mean the end of us owning our own labor, because they'll be able to take it away anytime they want, or program it, as you stated before. Right.
Exactly. They have been through inflation. This just gives them direct control. That's the difference. It was kind of, when the central bank created the inflation and then ran policy through the banks, it would take about 18 months from the policy decision until they knew whether or not it worked. Once they've got the CBDCs, That is second by second.
Ms. Sang, have you heard about this global tax, that corporate tax that the G7 was working on? Uh, can you
Absolutely.
explain to us a little bit about that and how it will affect what we pay at the stores as well, and how it will affect competition and all of that?
Well, sure, because right now, in a country that wants to be more competitive look, I was there in the early 80s when they started the conversation around globalization. And so, to start from where we are right now, we have to go back and look at history, because this is not something new. This is something that unfortunately corporations and central bankers have been working toward for a very long time. A one world government, a one world monetary system, a one world ability to tax. So we don't really have a lot of choices about things. They just create different packages so it seems like you have choices, but we don't. And so, I can remember back in the 80s and thinking to myself, I don't think this is such a good thing. So what happened to all the jobs, all the manufacturing jobs that used to be performed here in the US? Well, they went away. They went to China, they went to Vietnam, they went to cheaper parts of the world. Who would get their labor to work for the least amount of money? So countries around the world, if they could lower their tax base, and also control the income of their population, then corporations would go there because they would keep most of their money. We saw this in 2005 when they did a tax moratorium and allowed those corporations that were holding a lot of their profits overseas come back at basically nothing. And then we saw it again in 2018, where they did the same thing. Shocker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, history repeats itself. But in that move toward a one world government and one world taxation, now they're just ramping everything up. I mean, for a while there, really it started in the 2000s, where you had more people, individuals rising up, and there were more movements for deglobalization. Well, what we're dealing with now with the COVID pandemic kind of squashed all of that rebellion. You just have to look at Hong Kong and many other places to see how that just kind of squashed that. And now the push is back toward globalization. And those organizations that are gaining more and more power, like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, who has pretty much not all, but I think 189 out of 196 countries in the world, treasury secretaries and central bank chiefs, neither of which are elected officials.
Right.
And I think we can see a global coordination. So yes, they're talking about doing a global minimum tax on these corporations, which would be a challenge for some countries. Like Ireland is definitely a tax haven with the lowest rates, or some of the lowest rates. But again, this also goes back to the digital money, where maybe you need to be a little late paying your taxes. Oh no, they'll just take it out.
They'll just take it right out. Yep.
Take it right out. And that also, part of what they're also looking to in digitizing all assets means that they're also globally movable. So we are going to that one world. And what I mean by that is the discussion is to hold title to whatever real property you actually have, but break the value down into little tiny bite-sized pieces, like a buck a coin or what have you. Now you're out shopping and you see something that you want and you think, oh, it's just, I have this here. And then on your phone, everything's on your phone, and you start to, exactly. and you start to spend it, and somebody anywhere else in the world can now own your real property and you don't even realize it. So what you're referring to with the global corporate tax is far bigger than that. It's just a stepping stone to make a global universal tax. But make no mistake about it, you and I are in the crossfire of a global tax system and a global monetary system.
Wow. And then when they combine all of that with issuing an SDR as the world reserve currency, which is what I think they're heading towards, then it's going to be complete domination by one entity. One entity that is not elected is going to be able to control pretty much everything in the world. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. I had wondered, well, you know, what would the new currency be? And it was actually China. The SDRs were created, stands for special drawing rights. It's just a name. Just like the US dollar, just a name. They were created. Exactly. They were created in 1969 to take over as the world reserve currency from the US dollar. But Kissinger created the petrodollar, and so that was kind of put to sleep. But all of the mechanisms that were put in place were tested in 2009 and tweaked. And one of the things that they have, especially significant for those in America, is the substitution fund, where anywhere in the world can take their dollar-denominated instruments, so their bonds, currencies, whatever, deposit them into this fund, and then the IMF can convert them into SDR-denominated instruments. It's hard for me to call them assets. It really is. You know, a bond to me is, you know, it's an instrument. But in that way, they anticipate, just like they're trying to regulate now the mortgage moratoriums and all of that so that it doesn't have a huge instant impact on the real estate market. They would do the same thing with the dollar market. In theory, they would be sending those dollars back to the U.S. in kind of a scheduled way, but I think that's just a theory. It's all of these things are just huge experiments. It's just huge experiments. They have no experience with this.
So, Ms. Zang, one of the things that I look at every day is the Dixie, the dollar. And I think I know why, but I would rather hear it from you. So I see the dollar go up and go down pretty much on a daily basis. And I try to explain to people that only because the dollar is gaining strength, it doesn't mean that it's gaining strength against the things that you need to live on a daily basis. That it's only gaining strength against those other currencies that it's matched with. And because maybe they are printing more than we are printing, so it's gaining strength against them. So when you look at the Dixie or the dollar and it's gaining strength, it doesn't necessarily mean that your bread is going to cost less at the store. Am I looking at it the right way when I say that?
You're looking at it 100% the right way. That's why I always go back to what you want to watch is the purchasing power, right? And you know, they juggle things. You know, inflation. Oh, well, people aren't going to buy steaks when steaks get too expensive, so they'll buy hot dogs. So hedonics changes things out. You know it's a whole lot worse, but you're looking at it exactly the right way. Unless you are traveling or, you know, it makes it's part of what the currency wars are about. Let's devalue our currency over here so it makes our exports look cheaper over here. But what really, really impacts us on a day-to-day basis is how much that dollar will buy you.
Right.
And that's, you know, and there's less than 3 cents out of the original dollar's worth of purchasing power. Officially, we know it's worse than that.
It's more than that.
It's going to zero because it always does. 100% of the time. That's exactly what it does. That's why real money, gold and silver, and it isn't just because it's gold and silver. And I don't know why. I never hear anybody talk about this. But Physical gold and silver are used across the entire global economy, every single area. So
Yep,
it
indeed.
has the broadest base of functionality and the broadest base of buyer.
Yes, and I try to explain to people that the second most used commodity in the world is silver,
Mm-hmm.
and that is exactly why it can never go to zero. Because if and I tell people if tomorrow we woke up in a world with no silver, we'd be back 100 years.
Yes, we
Because
would.
everything that we do on an everyday basis has silver involved in it. Even if there's not silver in it, silver was used somewhere in the process, either to manufacture that product or to maintain the machines that make those products. And I
Right.
mean, there's 1,001 uses for silver. And although gold is not used as much in manufacturing and industry, the value that I put in gold, same as silver also when it comes to being a monetary metal, is because I tell people when you get an ounce of gold in your hands, I wish I had an ounce here somewhere, but I'm not that rich. But when you get an ounce of gold in your hand, you have to think of all of the labor, all of the capital, all of the investment, all of the human investment that went into digging that up out of the ground, transporting it to a refinery, making it into a bar or a coin, and then shipping it to a retailer where you can then go ahead and purchase it. I always say that gold and silver, their value are within themselves, that you don't have to assign it a value because their value is already there in the metal itself. And another thing that I like to say is that people look at gold and silver wrong. They nominally price silver and gold in dollars or in fiat, whereas in reality, the fiat is what's priced in silver and gold because silver and gold never change, whereas
Right.
fiat currency does. So do you
Right.
agree with that?
I agree with much of what you said, not all of it though,
Okay. All
because
right. Well,
they
tell
do.
me. I want to learn. So make sure you go ahead and correct me if anything.
Oh, absolutely. While silver is used more broadly in manufacturing, gold is actually also used in manufacturing.
Yes.
The
Yes.
difference between the two is that silver gets used up, but gold is indestructible. And that is one of the big reasons why it's the primary currency metal
Okay.
versus silver being the secondary currency metal.
Right.
Because it's the one that meets all of the criteria to be a monetary metal. Okay. And further than that, they have never been able to duplicate the traits that gold and silver have in the lab, or they would. Right?
Right.
So both gold and silver possess traits that are not duplicatable. And so they always have value. But what they have been able to duplicate easily on Wall Street are gold and silver contracts.
Yep. ETFs.
And right. And a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. So for $150, you can control almost $1 million at the moment nominally, $1 million worth of gold. That's a lot of leverage. That's a lot of leverage.
Indeed.
And
now, do you think that Basel III is going to change that, Ms. Zang?
well, that has already taken place, and I do think it's going to change it. I think it'll be a while before we see that. But with gold, I mean, gold, let's face it, gold has always really been the single safest thing that you can do. Even admittedly that it has no count. It's the only financial instrument that has no counterparty risk. The only one, admitted by the Bank for International Settlements, IMF, the Fed, everybody. No counterparty risk.
Yes.
I mean,
and I actually pulled up a calculator on one of my videos a while back to show people how much the dollar is devalued against gold. And you're right, it's more than 99%. There's less than a penny worth of value in the U.S. Federal Reserve note from 1913 to today if you value it against gold directly. So definitely, and I also did another chart, I also pulled a calculator out a second time, and I went ahead and showed how if you invest, I hate to call it investing because to me it's more like insurance, against the dollar and against governments, right? But if you would have taken and invested money in gold back in 1971, right after they took us off Bretton Woods, and invested the same amount of money in the stock market, in the Dow Jones, that today, even at these low prices after taking that hit, I think today we're like 1799, 1800, that even today, gold outperforms the Dow Jones. Even with all the ups and downs, long term, it outperforms the Dow Jones. Now, Ms. Zang, I have a question that one of our community members submitted. And their question was this, very good question, by the way. And they asked me, if we go to a CBDC, which I believe that we're going to eventually, how will you be able to use your gold to interact?
That is a great question. And there would be several ways. Number one, for 6,000 years, 100% of the time, you could always convert your gold and silver into any other currency and therefore good or service because of that huge broad-based demand. So you can convert it into the other currency and then utilize it that way. Additionally, and I've done this, so additionally, when people understand what's really happening with those fiat money, and they would prefer to be paid, particularly during hyperinflation. We saw this quite a bit back in 2012-13 during the sovereign debt crisis in Europe, where a lot of people were actually surviving by pulling out their silver jewelry, their gold jewelry, and we've certainly... And their teeth. Exactly. I actually have my father's gold tooth. I actually have that. And we've seen this time and time again, how when people were fleeing war-torn countries, they would hide their gold and silver in their clothes so that they could take some wealth with them, right? So we've seen this. This is not something new. History shows us how you will always be able to utilize the gold and the silver. And there is one more point that I wanted to bring up, because one of the points that you've been definitely making so beautifully is about our labor being valued, right? And how dollars destroy that. In 1971, now I could be off on my numbers, so bear with me on this. And you might want to do this directly. But in 1971, the average wage was $9,500. So if you had been paid in gold, then that would have worked out to, don't hold me to this, but I believe something like 249 ounces. If you never got a raise and you were still paid in that many ounces of gold, I think the last time I calculated it out was something like $345,000. Well,
we have been hoodwinked, Ms. Zang. We have been hoodwinked as a civilization. It's a shame. Sometimes I don't even like to think about that stuff because, so many people don't understand how much of their labor they have given up over just the last 50 years. Actually, the last 50 years coming here next month, August 15th. Just the last 50 years, since Nixon took us off the Bretton Woods. And they don't understand that that if a person back then was able to have one job and support a family, send their kids to college, have a vehicle that was in good condition, and have a home, and be able to pay all that off and then still be able to save and have a good retirement, what in the world has happened to our money if today it takes two people to work to run a household and just to keep their heads above water? I consider it, I get pretty emotional about this, or, excited about this. I consider it the theft of your life. is what I consider it, because we're giving up 70. I think it's about, just through inflation alone. I believe that in the normal work life of about 40 years or so, you give up 70% of your wealth just through inflation. That's not talking about taxes. That's not talking about all that stuff. We've been hoodwinked. But my hopes is that people that wake up now and can take a look and maybe look at history a little bit, maybe when we shift over to that new paradigm, maybe we can make a difference and push our rulers, as I like to call them our rulers, because that's what they think they are, and maybe push our rulers into having a more just system than we have now. Because I like to I like to study cycles, and I like to study cycles, and there's this one cycle that's called the Titler cycle, and it's almost like the fourth turning if you've read the book. And on the Titler cycle, there is a part of the cycle that's dependency, and right after dependency, which is where I believe that we are now, 100%. Dependency, right after that comes oppression. And then before we can get out of oppression, you have to find the spiritual courage and physical courage to fight yourself out of that system before you once again find liberty. And that's what I wish that we would be able to overt, is that part between the spiritual and the courage, because it means that people have to do bad things in order to find liberty again. So, and I think that that's possible with education, with people actually studying history and actually learning about the monetary system as we have it now, because it is so corrupt. And unfortunately, people just don't understand this. People just don't understand how they are being stolen from on a daily basis. And it's a shame, and it makes me sad. Yeah.
It is. You and I are definitely on the same page with that.
So, Ms. Zang, someone asked, is now a good time to buy a house?
It depends. Okay. Is now a good time to buy an investment property? No, that piece is easy. But you have to have shelter, and you have to have a place to make your last stand. And those that have followed my channel know that when March 2020 hit, I found the hole in my personal strategy, which is I did not have a bug out space, a safe space for my children, my family, and myself to go. And so I did buy property inside of this environment because it has a specific function. And the fiat money, I also have gold to offset it. So part of if you're going to buy real estate, part of what you absolutely have to be able to do is know that you can pay it off in a heartbeat, because that's how they're going to get the last vestiges into that digital system. So you do that. We have a whole strategy, and anybody at ITM can help you understand it and where this fits in. But real estate runs two dangers. Number one is resetting that mortgage, which anybody that had to do it in 2008 knows that really wasn't in their benefit, and also property taxes. And you need gold for both of those to offset that. Okay. Right. And as long as you can pay that principal off using gold, that is definitely part of the strategy, then it's okay. And also, as long as you can always pay your property taxes, because even during the Depression, you had the house paid off, but you couldn't pay your property taxes, you lost the house. So those are the two big dangers which we can account for. But as a speculation, no, I wouldn't be speculating in this. But as a necessity, place to make your last stand, place to protect your family, to grow food, to have water, to create your energy, that whole mantra piece, then it depends.
And yes, I agree 100%. You need a place to live. And especially now with low interest rates, if you need a place to live. Don't want to be a renter,
do you?
No, you don't want to be. I don't think so. In my opinion, no. I don't want to ever be a renter, ever. And people always come back and say, well, you have to pay property taxes. That's like renting. And I tell them, yes, but when you rent, you can't renovate the kitchen without asking for permission. You can if you want.
A mortgage, can you?
That's right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
it's
So,
even more important than renovating. You can't get rid of that monthly expense when you rent,
that's right.
and you can't get it fixed. So I'm not
Yep,
telling people to
absolutely.
rush out and buy because it again, it depends. The opportunities that lie ahead of us, and there's lots of nasty stuff that lies ahead of us, but there's also opportunities that lie ahead of us. Because if
Hmm.
you have to keep in mind, wealth never disappears. It merely shifts ownership.
Transfer. Yep.
Right. And so for gold, I mean, that is really the function, a big function of gold for me. And there's all different kinds of gold depending upon what you're trying to accomplish, right? Whether it's paying off that mortgage or putting yourself in a position, because historically, on average, I don't know if this will be average, better, worse, whatever, but historically, on average, 25 ounces of gold or the equivalent would buy an entire city block, buildings
Hmm.
and all. So, everybody at ITM has been trained in the strategy that I created back when I started studying currencies and life cycles in 1987. And because there's so many people there that are really so smart with just this huge wealth of knowledge and experience, we've really made that strategy. We took what I started and we made it better and better and better. And that's really what makes us different than any other gold or silver company. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to put somebody into gold or silver, but to execute a custom strategy, that takes a knowledge base, and you really have to understand the patterns and the way things move. And so I can't guarantee tomorrow, but I kind of feel like if something has happened the same way over 4,800 times,
Hmm.
doing the same thing, the best shot that we have is we're going to get the same results that history has proven every single time.
Yep.
That's
That's
the way
right.
I've positioned myself. That's what we've done at ITM. We've got a series of questions because what we want to know first is, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you have to work with? But your goals come first. It's the right tool for the job. So that's really
Right.
what makes it different and why I'm so passionate about it, because it's based on historic data.
Right.
Simple.
Well, Ms. Zhang, I want to be very respectful of your time. So we're going to go ahead and end it there. And of course, I'm going to provide links under the description of this video, ladies and gentlemen, for Ms. Zhang's ITM Trading YouTube channel and also the website. That way you can go check it out. And they do provide services. If you are interested, by all means, give them a call and see what they can do for you to help you out with whatever plans you may have for your financial future. Now, Ms. Zhang, I have to say, thank you very much. This has been, I'm looking at the time and I'm like,
The first one?
yeah, I'm like, oh my goodness, this has gone by so quick.
Yeah.
So I want to say that I know that my subscribers, my community members are going to be very giddy just as much as I am when they see this post and be able to view it. So I want to say thank you very much. And I'm really hoping that it won't be 2 years next time. So maybe
No.
I'll go ahead and shoot you an email here in the next 6 months to a year. And it'd be awesome if we can talk again to see where we're at then. And
I would suggest you go ahead and schedule it now, because I do get booked up really fast.
okay,
So,
I will. So again, thank you very much for your time, Ms. Zhang. I truly do appreciate it. It was great seeing you and very, very nice catching up on things that are going on in the economy and financial system nowadays. So ladies and gentlemen, prep up, not only with goods, not only with stuff that you need, that is primary and always first, because you need to eat and drink, but prep up your financial preps as well. That way, when we go over to that new paradigm, we don't have to start from the first rung of the ladder, just being able to meet the needs that we have to stay alive, but that we will also be able to strive. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Having said that, Ms. Zhang, thank you very much again. And we will talk to you next time. Many blessings to you, Ms. Zhang. Bye-bye.
you too. Bye-bye.